Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 474 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the small crew here this week. Richard is out and about this week, couldn't make it to the cast, but we're joined by Crim. Good morning, Crim. How are you today?
Morning. I'm good. I just actually saw Dune 2.
Oh, is it
recently.
good?
Yeah, it was sweet. It was really good. I love sci-fi movies and I love the director's movies. So that was fun. And then just had other than that, I had a fun little draft. I drafted murders. Yeah, over the weekend. I went to a little gathering that was hosted by Travis Gafford. I we memed about it, but I told him I'd give him a little shout out on the podcast because it was a fun draft.
Did you end up Demir or like Grixis or something? Was it a Crim draft?
I definitely did end up Demir, but I had good cards. I actually had good cards. I swear I didn't force the Demir deck. I had good cards.
All right, that's fair then. That sounds like a fun weekend. So today we're going to be jumping around. We don't have any like super huge topics, but we got a bunch of like smaller topics we want to get to. Some tournament stuff, some questions about tournaments, some changes to wordings on Magic cards. Modern Horizons 3, we talked about it last week. Crim wasn't here last week, but me and Richard talked about Modern Horizons 3 for Modern, but we want to talk a little bit about that set and what we want out of it for Arena, because we know the set's coming to Arena for Timeless and Historic. We got a few spoilers for that, some Magic price stuff, and then of course some Fishmail questions. So that's the plan for today. Before we get into it though, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit is the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. And if you ever get tired of the hassles of buy listing, you can skip them with Card Conduit. You can use their curated service to send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a bit of work, you can use the sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. And no matter which option you choose, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once your order is processed. And you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic. And let's start with what I think is some tournament news, but not in the way you're thinking. So there was a couple of big topics regarding tournaments. And as soon as I saw this Reddit post, I knew I had to ask Crim about it because it's so funny. So this post was on Reddit like a couple days ago, 3 or 4 days ago, but it was basically from someone. The title is, I got kicked out from a tournament because my deck was too competitive. What should I do? So the story here, and of course this is one side of the story. This is the player who got kicked out of the tournament, but their story is they went to a 1v1 commander tournament at an LGS. They brought a Dragonlord Ochitai deck that was pretty high powered, and after 2 rounds, the LGS kicked him out with no prizes and no refund because their deck was too competitive because it was running cards like Mana Crypt and Mana Vault and Jewel Lotus and Mox Diamond. So they were unhappy about that. They booted them from the event. Crim, what do you think of this? Is there any world where people should be kicked out of tournaments for playing too competitive of decks?
Hold on. So let me get this straight. Somebody got kicked out of a tournament that they paid for because their deck was too competitive.
Yes.
You turned a casual format into a tournament setting, and then there was prizing, and you were surprised somebody brought a good deck. That's comedy. That's actually comedy. All right. Once you turn that into an actual tournament and put prizing, then you are I'm curious, what are the guidelines? What are the rules that you have set in place so that you can then cover your bases as a store to kick this person out? There is no way to actually regulate that, right?
So, yeah, not really. I mean, so I think it would be fair game if you wanted to do, so the idea of Commander 1v1 casual Commander tournaments is weird to me anyway. But let's say you did want to do that. If you wanted to post a house ban list, like we do on Commander Clash, like if you're like, hey, we're going to do this Commander event, here's the bans for that event, I think that would be fair. Like if you want to make that ahead of time, but there's no way you can run a tournament and then boot people out mid-tournament because their deck's too good. Like if you don't want people playing Mana Crypts and Mana Vaults and do Lotuses in the tournament, you should just like make that a thing ahead of time, right? Where like make your own ban list for the event or something. But it's wild to me that you would actually kick someone out for that. And I know some people are like, oh, maybe there's got to be more to the story. Maybe the guy was like a jerk and they want to get rid of him or something. But still, like you can't just kick someone out for playing a good deck. Like if I went to a tournament, I would assume I was supposed to play my strongest deck. Like if I'm paying an entry fee and there's prizes, my expectation would be play my strongest deck and try to win it because it's a tournament. If it was a casual game, that might be different, but yeah, it's definitely wild to me. Do you think that Commander's just like creeping into tournament play, Crim? Like 5 years from now, are we gonna like, is this gonna be a thing? Like getting kicked out because your deck's too good out of tournament Magic?
Oh God. I can't imagine what a TO would look like for the how like at the end of the day, it has essentially become a daycare center, right? Like where like everyone's gonna be complaining, crying about something random and some arbitrary card, and it's for some arbitrary reason. So, oh God, I don't know if it is or it isn't, but I'm begging you, please don't. Like, just please don't, okay? Or else I can't imagine waking up, at 7 a.m., driving 2 hours, going like what, halfway through a tournament and getting like just kicked out of a tournament because somebody's like, whoa, bro, did you just Doomblade me?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to deal with that. Oh my God, that would be so miserable. And again, there may be more to this story.
Right. We're seeing one side, so yeah.
Yeah, there's always two sides to the story. So for right now, with the very limited information we have of just a simple Reddit post, like, God. But regardless of that, do not turn casual Commander into it. We can't even handle CDH in a tournament.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that is technically, more, refined, if you would, for tournament play.
Yep.
And if we can't even have CDH, there is no way you're going to put a bunch of people in a room, in a tournament with paid entry and prizes to play a casual Commander tournament.
I think that might be the underlying problem is like, a lot of people expect casual Commander to be casual. And if you show up at a tournament and you're someone who's used to just playing casual, I could see how you would be expecting, because it's Commander, like the Rule Zero conversation and people to play their fun decks or whatever. I think casual Commander is just not a good tournament format. I think that was like maybe the underlying problem is like, don't even try to run casual Commander tournaments because the results are like, it's just not going to go well. There's no good ending to that scenario. I got another question related to this. And like we said, we only saw one side of this story. So this isn't about this LGS in specific, because I don't know the details beyond this Reddit post. But Crim, have you ever had to deal with like a bad LGS? Like, let's say this story was 100% true and they kicked you out. Do you go back there the next week? Do you find a new LGS? Like, how do you handle it from that level?
Well, first off, it's definitely not sanctioned, right? So this tournament is not sanctioned. I don't know, like how it works, like if you go to like an F&M, they're running their program and it's sanctioned, like there's like this, like there's the whole WER program, or there was. I don't know how Magic works today. That's how casual I've become. I would like to think that maybe there's, I don't know, I know there's apps now that help you find stores. Yeah. Right, to go and play. So it's like, yeah, maybe this store sucks. Yeah. But like I would say try to find a new store, but sometimes there's areas in town where the only spot is this one spot. So there is a monopoly. I was, blessed to grow up in an area where we had what eventually became Channel Fireball. And then also we had Card Art in Sunnyvale. Stores like that. So these stores have all been great and fun to play Commander at, or just Magic in general. Yeah. But I guess obviously, intuitively, just go find a new store. But some of these places, locations, they just don't have multiple LGSs.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you do. I don't know if there's a way to regulate that or be like, yo, hey, I was unjustly kicked out of this tournament and, like they lose their WPN, whatever,
Yeah.
license. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know how running a tournament like on that end looks.
Especially if it's unsanctioned. I would imagine if it's not a
Yeah.
sanctioned event, it would be hard to get like WotC involved in it or anything because it was unsanctioned. But still, it's definitely not a great look for the LGS. The funny thing too is apparently they wouldn't even refund them, which is like that was the part that like kind of put me. I was like, wow, like just what is it, $5? How much can it possibly be to play in this 1v1 commander tournament? Just give the poor dude his $5 back and like be done with it. So
yeah, like at least from the store's perspective, just be like, hey, you know what? Just take your money back.
Take your money. We're done. Yeah.
Well, you can't play anymore because you brought a Doomblade, but also here, have your money back.
And it was Dragonlord Ojutai. It's not even like it was some CDH deck. It was Dragonlord Ojutai with like fast mana in it. Well, speaking of tournament magic, there was another interesting tournament magic topic, and this was actually from Twitter where I first saw it, from Skite MTG at Skite_MTG. But the TLDR of this rather long post is there were 3 reasons that this person had an issue with foils and like all art cards in tournament play. So I wanted your perspective on this, Crim. So the argument was basically foils are bad for tournament play. Alt art like Secret Lair, textless cards, any of the invocations, any of that stuff shouldn't be allowed for tournament play. And the 3 reasons were, one was cheating, and the cheating would be like your foils being marked or whatever. We've seen that in the past, like the issue with foils curling. So that's one. 2 was it causes issues for viewers and commentators because they might not be able to recognize the alt art cards, like watching on stream or commentating on stream. And the last one was accessibility issues for new players or visually impaired players. Like you can't easily just recognize the alt art card if you're a new player because you don't know like the alt art. Is there any validity to this? Like, should we be banning foils / alt art cards from tournament play?
No. I mean, like, okay, maybe I'm biased because right now in my backpack, I'm sitting on a standard, like, Esper control deck that have 4 different deserted beaches. And like, you know what I mean? And I have all different wandering emperors. So like the whole thing about this though is like, I don't see what the problem is. Like it's not like I've graffitied, like Weenie Hut Jr. over my cards or something like that. I'm not doing, like, if I'm going into a tournament, it is annoying. I think the only validity to this whole thing that's brought up is marked cards.
Yeah.
Like if I only foiled my lands or if I only foiled my counter spells knowing that they would curl, that's the only thing that I feel like is actually valid from this. First off, commentators and like obviously you want the game to be, accessible and whatnot to other players and the opponents around you. But like, I mean, it's a legal game piece, right? It is a legal game piece. It is a game piece made by Wizards of the Coast. I don't see why I shouldn't be able to play this. I apologize, obviously, if it's like, oh, well, like, if it isn't like up to like par for some people, but like I think the only validity is, again, I just can't I would hate for marked cards. I fully know that some of my cards are foil, and because I like to mix and match, I've already came to terms with it. I'm probably gonna go to some RCQ and someone's gonna try to scum me and just be like, oh, check his deck. And you know what? There probably will be a curled foil, and I'm just accepted it because, like, you know what? As the kids would say, I'm standing on business. I'm going to fully get DQ'd for my mix and match, and I fully accept it.
I could see an argument for banning. Well, okay. I don't think they should do this, but I can see an argument for banning foils for the reason that you've stated. Like, because the quality is so lacking sometimes and they curl so much, I don't think you need to ban them. But I would say, as you were just mentioning, if you are a tournament player, be careful about that. Like, I don't think I would play foils in a deck if I was going to a tournament, just because I know there's a risk that some of them will be curled and you could get DQ'd. So I think that's more on the player, though. I don't think Wizards needs to like outright ban foils. The other stuff, I think the points are legitimate. Like, yes, it is harder to know what card your opponent has on the battlefield when there's 20 versions of a card instead of one version of a card. Maybe it's harder for commentators. I can't really speak to like visually impaired players or anything, but I think there is some validity to that. But at the same time, I don't think you can ban these cards. And I think if anything, this is going to keep getting worse because WotC's really embraced printing these special versions. Like, that's one of the biggest things in Magic in 2024. Secret layer drops, anime versions. We're getting more and more of these cards. So I think we as players have to adjust to it, right? Like, maybe the old ability that you had to like see the one Tarmogoyf in existence and know at a glance what card it is, maybe that's just not how Magic's gonna be anymore. Would it be better if it was the old way where every card had one art? Like, maybe for tournament play, but overall I think the game's better that we have these different versions of cards, right? And you can customize and play the ones that you like, or play like Crim with all the different versions. So I would say, like, I think there's legitimate points here. But I think it's on us as players to like adjust to that and make sure we're playing legal foils or not playing foils in our deck, rather than having WotC like ban these cards from tournament play.
Hold on, I'm gonna stop you there. I don't think that's on us. I think that's on Wizards of the Coast needing to make better foils.
Oh, the
right?
foil,
yeah. It is insane to me. I was sitting there at the draft yesterday, and then some people were cracking some collector's boosters. They ripped a case file foil vein ripper. We looked up the pricing of it, $25. Non-foil standard printing is $45.
That's like half price. Half price.
Yeah, it is literally so bad that vein ripper is just more in basic normal art, non-foil. That tells you that there's definitely something wrong, by the way, Wizards, and maybe we make some better foils.
Yeah, yes.
Seriously, somehow in a game, in the world, the vast sea of TCGs, they have managed to make the worst foils.
That's kind of embarrassing too, because they've also been around the longest. It's kind of funny when you see these new games like pop up out of nowhere and their foils are like really stellar, and then WotC's been doing it for 30 years and just can't seem to get it together with the foils. So definitely agree that WotC can improve that. My other question with this, Crim, is how big of a deal do you think it really is? Like, you play in more tournaments than I do, I think. So I'm going based more on like Commander when I'm playing at a Magic Con or something. That's where I play most with randoms. And I would say stuff like, one of the cards that was brought up is like textless Omnath, which I guess is like the Zoomer version of textless Cryptic, this like kind of iconic card with a ton of text that's textless. Like, how often do you actually see those cards in the wild though? Because I feel like, for me, it seems like a pretty low percentage. Like, when I play against people like at a Magic Con and we're just jamming games, those like super rare secret layer printings or these like promos that are textless and really rare, just most people don't have them. Most people are playing like the base version or maybe like the showcase version from the main set. So I feel like maybe that aspect, like textless cards or like invocations with the unreadable text, maybe it's really not that big of a deal because those cards are just so scarce. You're not going to play against them that much anyway, because most people aren't going to spend, you know, textless Omnath prices or invocation prices when they can get the cheaper version. So do you see those cards a lot, like in the wild?
See this, I have seen specifically Cryptic, and I've seen also Omnath as well. So I've seen exactly both of those cards, and the one thing that was cool is in their Commander deck box they had the text version.
Ooh, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, so they, like, when somebody had Omnath as their commander, underneath their commander, they just popped out the text version. This was like, okay, cool. Well, if you need to read it, here you go. Like, this is for the table, and this one's for the board. Like, right? Like, the table can read this one. And I thought that was great. I thought that was pretty nice, because in Commander, whereas, like, in 60, 75 card format, again, it's not on me to have all the cards, right? So, like, but in Commander, I want all my opponents to know what the cards do, right? Because it's a different format, it's a different way of playing, and I don't think there's anything wrong, by the way, with you playing textless cards. You can play with cryptics and whatnot because I know them, and that's for me, right? But for the newer players and all that, I think I would have the text version handy nearby, or something that is a good way to just show the rest of the table what it actually does.
I wonder if it would be possible now that we're doing so many like double face card things. I wonder with like the promo Omnath or something, or the cryptic, if they printed it today, wonder if you could do like the text list front side and then have the text on the back side. And then people, like, if they want the text, just flip it around and you could actually see what the text was. Because card back doesn't matter anymore, really, right? We have so many weird card backs that it's not like we have to have the card back on a card, because we have so many double face cards and MDFCs and so forth. That could be an interesting way to get around it.
Do we want that? I mean, honestly, I actually think it'd be funny if they straight up just removed the text on the back as well, and they just had like the blank, Magic the Gathering back, but it doesn't even say Magic the Gathering. I say if you go textless, you fully commit to it.
That's like an artist proof. You just get a blank,
yeah,
a blank back.
Yeah, you just have like the back is just straight up like the gray or in brown and blue and the colors, but you don't actually see the words Magic the Gathering on it. But yeah, I mean, you could probably put the text on the back. Why not?
Well, let's move on. I wanted to ask you about this. So we heard from Mark Rosewater this week. We're getting a new templating with Bloomborough, which is the set that comes out in August, the animal set. But we're getting a new templating where cards that say enters the battlefield, maybe my favorite line of text on Magic cards, are now just going to say enters. So enters will mean when this enters the battlefield. They're not going to change leaves the battlefield, because there's some like weird rules implications, or if they shorten that, like it could mean leaves the graveyard or something, and it would be too ambiguous. But for enters the battlefield in specific, it's going to be enters, so they don't need to spend as many words on this ability, basically, because cards are getting too wordy. What do you think of this change, Crim? And is there anything else we could do this with, that we could shorten the terms? But what do you think about enters instead of enters the battlefield?
I mean, that was the main thing. I was worried about any kind of rules implications or anything like that. But I'm gonna trust that they've vetted it, and that there isn't anything weird. Like if you're telling me you can shave a line or two off of text in Magic cards, I think that's a good thing, right? Like it simplify things a lot more. I kind of hope they can keep just testing and testing and testing to see what else they could trim like that as well. Because the last thing, we in the beginning of Magic, as a bunch of players would always laugh, like, Yu-Gi-Oh has like 4 million cards on there, or 4 million texts on their cards. But now we are the same. The only difference is that we have bigger text font. So, but we're also making sure to make use of every little bit of open space on every Magic card nowadays. So I do think that we should try to simplify as many things as we can. And enters the battlefield, sure, that could have been trimmed down, and I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this change too. We've seen in the past, there's always, like, whenever anything changes, there's going to be some people who are upset about it. I remember converted mana cost becoming mana value, and like, oh, that's going to be weird. I don't know if I like it. And now it's been a few years, and I'll tell you, mana value is it's better. It's just better. Maybe it's not as traditional, but it's less words. It's easier to say. We saw like shuffle your library just become shuffle. And that one I think has also been like a positive. So I'm fully on board with this. I think this is like a good change. I guess the only tiny downside, if you want to nitpick on this, is maybe this lets WotC print even more convoluted and wordy cards, because they don't have to spend as many words on enters the battlefield. But I think overall, like, the more unnecessary words that we can trim off Magic cards, the better it's going to be overall. Like, it's simpler, and these changes don't really have an impact on gameplay. So I hope WotC can do more of this in the future, actually.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. That's hopefully I don't know what else. Is there anything else we could do? Because I know that WotC is trying to trim a lot, and that is also there is one bad change, I think, and the bad change has been the random removal of like reminder text on some actual abilities. Just having like seen that in like some drafts, right? It's just like, hey, we're gonna just remove how. This isn't an actual card, but like it just as an example, what if they just removed how disguise worked?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like, okay, well, what is disguise? So I don't think we should be cutting removal, like reminder text like that. I'm okay with the lands one, like, like the shock lands, no longer telling you like, oh, this taps and adds a red or blue. But it's more so when it comes to like an ability, like a full on ability, you just leave that there.
Yeah, that's really tough, isn't it? Because you see that like that clash between how can I make this card play as good as possible and how can I put all the words that I want on this card. And I think that's what we run into is like if a card has a lot of text and like a wordy ability, sometimes you just like there's not enough room to fit the reminder text. And then that does end up being a problem, I think, especially for new players, or like limited is a big one, like especially if you haven't done a lot of drafts of the format and it's some random common or whatever that isn't a popular ability in standard. So yeah, I think that like finding a way to keep the reminder text is good. Although at the same time, on some cards, I think it's just not possible because there's so many words of the actual text on the card that there's just not enough room for the reminder. I don't know how to solve that, honestly, but I think that is a real concern. As for what other abilities we could do this with, I'm actually not sure. They already said they don't want to do leaves because they thought that could be too confusing. That's the obvious one, right? If enters the battlefield is enters, leaves the battlefield could be leaves. But WotC doesn't want to do that one. I guess the only other thing is just trying to do more unkeyworded mechanics. Like I think the mill change was a good one, right? So in the past, they would have to be like, put so many cards from the top of your library into your graveyard or whatever. And now they can just be like mill X number of cards. So I think maybe more of that, more like keywording of abilities that are like, what about like ramp? Is there any way you could do ramp? Like Topiary Stomper, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Is there any way that could just be like, when it enters the battlefield, ramp a basic or something? And that would mean search your library, put it on the battlefield tap. Like, could we do shortcutting like that? Or would that just be too confusing?
I don't think that works as well, right? Because then, like at that point, what you'd also have to like make a bunch of keywords and separate them from ramp from like basic and non-basic, right? And then
I guess that's
true.
It
gets a little bit of like into like a bit of a murky waters there when it comes to that. And then what about if like they go and grab, I don't know, I guess let's just Court of Calling or something. Is that ramping, or like? So I'm thinking of it from like also a new player perspective as well, and I can't imagine that going well if I just say I ramp this.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I was thinking of like search too, where a lot of things are like search your library, but then sometimes a card will tell you to search another zone. Like do you search your graveyard? I think
no,
like extirpate, like does extirpate search your graveyard? Yeah, I don't know.
It searches your opponent's deck.
Is there any way you could just have like search instead of like search your library? That makes me think of like the shuffle thing, how we used to have shuffle your library and then they realized, what else are you going to shuffle? So we'll just say shuffle and people will know it means your library. Maybe some more stuff like that could somehow shorten things, but
I am curious though if like maybe there is something better for searching, but then like do we need, I think with searching you really have to mitigate the chances of like cheating in tournament play as well.
Yeah.
So you have to be very specific. So like that's why I think searching is a weird area where I think you need to leave it as is. I'm just curious if there's got to be something else you can trim down, but I don't know.
Well, enter seems like a good change, at least. That seems like an easy one, and I think that one will be a positive overall. But let's move on to the world of Arena. So we got a couple of different Arena topics. The first one I wanted to get to is everyone's favorite Alchemy is getting some new cards with Murders at Karlov Manor. They spoiled Murders at Karlov Manor Alchemy this week. Was actually some confusion as to whether there would be Alchemy for this set, because there had been some rumors that like the Alchemy team got laid off with all the layoffs back in December. But we have a new Alchemy coming. We're not going to do like spoilers of it or whatever, but there is one card in specific that has caused a lot of conversation, and that card is Juggle the Performance. So Juggle the Performance, actually a pretty cool design. It's a 3-mana Rakdos sorcery that says each player discards their hand, then conjures a duplicate of each of 7 random cards from the library of the player to their right into their hand. The duplicates can perpetually gain. You can spend mana as any type to cast a spell. So essentially a wheel, except you wheel from your opponent's deck, essentially. But what really caught people's eye on this card is it says the player on your right. So Arena right now, it's a 1v1 game. So it was, as far as any mode that we currently have, this could just say your opponent's library or whatever, right? There's like, there's a lot of ways you could word this. And many people immediately jump to, does this mean multiplayer is coming to Arena? Does this wording of player on your right, is this WotC sending some sneaky hint that Commander's about to come to Arena or 4-player historic brawler, whatever? Do you think this means anything, Crim? Or is this just the best wording for the card and everyone's thinking way too much about this one little phrase?
Okay, so I would like Arena to get like some form of a Commander variant, right? Historic brawl, but like multiplayer or whatever, right? Like I would really like that, but I think this is just convenient wording.
Yeah.
I think this is convenient wording. I'm trying to imagine how many things would break on Arena if they included 2 other players, right? We've seen the game break with just 1v1. So now we're going to try to throw in 2 other people. I am very concerned about it. I would love to see it. Trust me, I'm the first person that would be the most excited, right? Like,
Yeah.
Considering that, as a content creator and also someone who just wants to play Commander and also have a digital outlet to play it on as well, that'd be great. But I'm going to be honest, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you think they could do it? Like, we're seeing it now, like just at launch of a new set. Something usually breaks on Magic on MTG Arena.
I can't really see it. Like, I think mobile is like the biggest thing. There might be some way that you could like maybe make it work on PC, but they also want Arena to be a mobile game and people play it on their phones. I can't imagine a world where you can play a 4-player game of Commander on Arena on your phone. So I think they'll do something, maybe like, I don't know, a new client, or maybe they do a full revamp of Arena to somehow make it work. But I would say, here's the biggest reason I think this card doesn't mean anything as far as multiplayer coming to Arena. I would bet you that if WotC knew 4-player was coming to Arena in the near future, they would be promoting that like crazy, because that is such a huge win. Like, if they knew 6 months from now, a year from now, they would be talking about it. They would be getting people hyped up because so many people would love to have that happen. So I don't think there's any way that they would like sneakily spoil Commander coming to Arena by putting this one word of text on an alchemy card for a format that most people don't even play anyway. So I think they would be shouting it from the rooftops if it was actually like in the works and nearing completion.
Yeah. There's no way they'd be subtle about it.
Yeah.
And they'd be rolling out some new way to charge us triple wild cards.
Oh no. What I'm really afraid of is that the solution they come to is like, oh, we'll just make a Commander client that's like Arena-like, but it's its own thing. And as someone who went through the like Moto to Arena changeover, and Moto's still going and doing well with Daybreak, how many different clients can people actually buy cards for? Like, now if you want to play Modern, you got to buy an Arena. If you want to play Standard or Timeless, you got to buy or on Moto and then on Arena for those cards. You can't really add a third client to the mix, can you, to like support Commander?
No, you shouldn't. But will they still do something like that? I could see that, right? It's
Yeah.
like, why not? I unfortunately, I hope they don't. I hope they just bring it to like Arena, like you had mentioned, or something like that, and just like work on it there. But I have to imagine there'd be some kind of like overhaul on the game as a whole, like the client as a whole, in order for them to make it happen on Arena, right?
It would have to be like Arena V2 or something. It would have to be like a full-on reworking. How big would it be, Crim? Like, that's the other question I have. Like, do you think it would be huge? My only, because my gut reaction is yes, it would be massive. But then I think about it and I'm like, for how many people is Commander really about the social aspect? For how many people is it like, I'm actually hanging out with my friends or hanging out at my LGS. I'm sitting down with other people face to face. We're joking and playing. Like, you can't even chat on Arena. I guess you can crowd surf a Karn or something, but it's not like you have that same
That you
social.
can.
You can do that in paper too, apparently, somehow.
Now I can.
But you don't really have that same social interaction on Arena, but it would still be pretty massive, right? Like, a ton of people would play if you could, and it was decent.
Yeah, like even if for the people that want to just play and have it so that it's just with them, chilling and just, having a good time with their friends, for maybe those people won't have as have a need to get on this client, right? But even if they're able to like appease a minimal amount of the population that would play it, that's still a high number that would want to play it.
Yeah, even if it was 10% of Commander players or something, that would be a huge amount of new players on Arena.
Right. So just that alone, good enough. So I really would love to just like buy into the hype and that everyone believes as much as the next person. But I am just, I am so doubtful that is happening to Arena.
Yeah, me too. It would be nice, but well, I guess we'll see. You never know, but I wouldn't get my hopes too high. Speaking of Arena, so last cast, you were on your way back from MagicCon Chicago, Crim, so you didn't get to talk about these cards. We got a bunch of spoilers from MagicCon Chicago, and we got Bloomburrow, Assassin's Creed, we got a bunch of different sets, but the one I'm most intrigued by is Modern Horizons 3. So if you go back to last cast, Richard and I talked about some of these cards in the context of Modern, but one of the cool things about Modern Horizons 3 is it's coming to Arena. So it's going to be an Arena. It's going to be legal and timeless, and I believe historic as well, as far as we know. And that's what I'm really curious about, Crim, is first off, I assume you've seen the spoilers. Is there anything that jumps out at you from the spoilers we've seen that could really have a big impact on the Arena formats where this is going to be legal?
Okay. Obviously in Timeless, Timeless has got randomly show and tell.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's gonna change, right? That's got to change.
I'm hoping that's gonna change, but
actually,
right now, Modern, Timeless is in a place where it's got, I think, cards like show and tell, but it doesn't have the efficient answers yet, right? So I have already talked about how I think Force of Negation and that cycle of forces could be legal in Timeless. And because again, it's even if those got printed, I don't even think that solves the issue, because it only stops some things. Yeah. And as we've seen, I think is it the special guest slot for this set, we're going to be getting Solitude.
Yup.
So if that's the case, then we're getting Solitude on Arena as well, because we got the special guest cards from Murders. And I think that we've already got the fetches, we've already got Lelia, so I'm not too worried about that. But I am excited to see what else comes out. Right? Everything that we've seen so far doesn't make me think that like, oh my God, this is gonna end Timeless or anything like that either. I think that everything I've seen is just in line with the power level of Timeless. I still see a lot of things that might be too cute, unless show and tell is handled. But I am excited to see maybe the Force Cycle. I think the Force Cycle would be cool. Of the cards spoiled, I mean, yeah, elves exist, so Priest of Titania is a thing. We've seen Flare of Cultivation, right? We've seen that one. I do think that these cards seem way more balanced and a lot more safe than let's just say Solitudes and things like that. But I mean, as of right now, I don't know what the other ones do, and I don't know if they all require you to sack a non-token creature of some sort. But I mean, some decks won't have a problem with that. These cards feel like they would go in a specific deck. Like Aristocrats, getting like a black and white version of this or whatever would be pretty happy, or Yogg. Because Yogg is on Arena, or versions of Yogg in Timeless. So, yeah, Modern Horizons 3 has definitely got me pretty hyped for boosting up the power level of Timeless. But I'm also hoping that the answers get better too, because that's what Timeless needs as they introduce more powerful things into the meta.
Yeah, I think Flare of Cultivation could be interesting in the Primeval Titan, like Field of the Dead deck, because you're
Yeah.
playing, although I think that deck is like incredibly poorly positioned right now against Show and Tell decks. Like it's kind of a joke how much that deck gets wrecked by Show and Tell, because it's very good against fair decks, but very ungood against like faster combo decks. But I think it'd be very Flare of Cultivation, because you have essentially 8 Arboreal Grazers, right? You're playing like the Alchemy one, Cami of Bamboo Grove or something, along with Arboreal Grazer. So you're going to have the turn 1 green creature, ramp it, sack it, ramp it. I'm really glad you brought up Show and Tell in Force of Negation, because I agree with you. The spoilers we've seen so far, I'm intrigued by Psychic Frog a lot. I don't know if it's actually, like, it still just dies to Fatal Push, but I'm intrigued by, like, the possibilities of that card. But there's really nothing that jumps out as like, okay, this is going to break Timeless. But there's a whole bunch of cards to go. And right now in Timeless, as you mentioned, Show and Tell is kind of the dominant force. And the gimmick of Timeless is we don't really want to ban cards unless we have to. So I know Wizards is going to try not to ban it if they can help it. Maybe it gets to that point, but they're going to try their best not to. So what can they print in Modern Horizons 3 or an anthology or something that can let the meta adjust to these powerful combo cards? Because Show and Tell is kind of next level. We had like Necro decks that were really good and some like Storm decks, but Show and Tell, I think, is a new level of combo power for Timeless. Is Force of Negation the answer? What about Force of Will? Is Force of Will not a good answer because the Show and Tell decks will also play Force of Will to protect their combo?
Yeah, right. Like they're gonna, that's just gonna go right into those decks. I think that the two things that you want to look at when putting this set out, like they're not accounting for Timeless, right? Because this is clearly built for Modern.
Yep.
But I would like to see, is it something that's good in Modern that would be able to like help Modern out? Like, you know, Modern answers things in Modern. And I think that is going to be the one shortcoming of the set when it comes to Timeless. They're not going to be printing as if like, well, oh, by the way, in Timeless, Show and Tell is running rampant. They're just going to print it, I assume, for a Modern and then just hit print. And then if anything works out and like, you know, falls in Timeless's favor, that'll be great. Although I am a little bit worried about that.
Force of Negation, though, could show up, right? Just because it's like a $50 Modern Horizon reprint. Would that be, you don't think that would be enough to really stop Show and Tell? It would help to some extent, maybe, but not really fully shut it down.
Yeah, it would definitely help. All right. But I do worry about, like, that's not the only deck that is a problem, because like you had mentioned, Primetime, it's also kind of just like, all right, well, I'm gonna, on my turn, what is it? Your turn, your first land, I'll already be on 3 mana. Your second mana, I'll be on 4. So it's as simple as, do you have counterspell for my whatever Nature's Lore, not Nature's Lore, the 4 mana spell that tutors through their deck, right, and gets after they sack a creature. So like there's like that deck closes out games insanely fast. Because just them getting to that first Titan on what is your 2 mana, it's already over, right? Like I don't know what you think could happen from there. So
natural order, but Force of Negation would be good against that too, right? Because you can stop the natural order at least. Like, you're not going to stop the Primeval Titan, but it would slow that down. It would slow down like Dark Ritual Necro decks. You could counter the Necro. Yep. So I feel like Force of Negation might be the hero. Not that it's going to totally make these decks unplayable or anything, but I think it might be the hero that would really give decks at least some chance to fight against them. Because I very much agree with you. A lot of ways, Timeless feels like Legacy or even Vintage, except without the defensive cards that make those formats function, where you have, sure, you have these combos in Legacy that would consistently win the game on turn 1, but there's Force of Negation or Force of Will that can stop these. Timeless has all the combos, or many of them, but it doesn't actually have the defensive pieces yet. So I think that's what it's missing the most, right? Is like those style of effects to let the fair decks kind of compete with the fast combo decks.
Yeah. Like, right now, the thing I'm doing is I'm just jamming a ton of Containment Priests to see what I can get away with. Like that's just what I've been doing.
Taxes is actually kind of good against the Show and Tell decks. I've built a couple of Taxes decks. If you stack up Thalia's, Containment Priests, you can actually kind of get them. You lose to everyone else. Like, you never beat the Primeval Titan deck, but you do beat the Show and Tell decks.
Well, see, this is why you just go red-white Taxes, and I've been blowing up lands in Blood Moon as well.
Blood Moon, yes.
So but the problem is, if they do the forces, right, do they reprint they put the other forces in the cycle. Because if they do that, then Blood Moon is no longer a clean answer to the Titan decks.
Ooh, that's true, because they're gonna have Force of. Oh no, what's the green one? Force of
Vigor, I think.
Vigor, yes, thank you.
Yeah. So like
that is very good against Blood Moon.
But I mean, yeah, like I would like to see these forces. I think they'd be nice, especially the blue one.
The rest of them would be fine, right? The black one is pretty fringe. The red one and white one, pretty fringe. So I think you could probably print the entire cycle. It would make me sad that Blood Moon is worse, but at the same time, if I'm trying to lock you out of playing Magic, it's fair that you can interact with my 3-mana enchantment that ruins all your lands. Yeah, I would like to see that. What about Solitude? So we know Solitude is coming as a special guest. Are we expecting more of that cycle? Or do you think this is like a one-off, like we got Crashing Footfalls as a special guest, but none of the other free, like no mana value spells? Do you think we'll see like Grief or Fury or any of those cards? Or is this just Solitude as a one-off?
I think that it makes sense to put the rest of them there. And because it makes sense, they won't be there.
Yeah, that is fair. I mean,
right?
Would they be too busted? Like, would Fury and Grief be too busted in that format? I feel like Endurance is fine. I mean, for sure. Subtlety
Fury
is fine.
Is too busted.
Fury might be too much. Yeah, Fury was too much for Modern, and Grief is still pretty obnoxious in Modern. Like, I don't know if I want Rakdos Scam. I think you have the pieces to make Rakdos Scam a deck in Timeless if you got the rest of the Evoke Elementals, which I don't know if I would enjoy that. It probably would slow down the combo decks. You're not going to combo if you don't have any cards.
Yeah, it would slow down the combo decks, and I will say that it'd be nice, it'd be cool, right, to like have them. But then as I think about it, like I too can't imagine a world where like Scam is running around in Timeless, because there's no way Timeless is just not more powerful. It's straight up not more. I guess Show and Tell is like one of the few things that makes it a lot more powerful. Like it's really weird. Timeless at points looks like it's more powerful than Modern and like closer to Legacy. And then there's times where it's like, is this a standard deck, right? Or is this, like some weird fringe power like format, like with full pet cards? So
it is a weird mix, yeah.
It's a weird mix. It's a good mix. I like it, but I think that there's definitely downsides to it. So if you're going to be adding more powerful things, you need to be also adding more powerful answers. And the nice thing about Timeless is though these cards aren't designed for Timeless, they could just. When was the last time we had what are they called? Like the Horizons, but Historic Horizons essentially, or whatever.
Yeah.
When is the last time we had one of those sets? Because I think they could do an emergency just like shot of like answers into the format through, like if let's just say Force isn't in this, they could just add it.
Yeah, like anthology, right? One of those anthologies.
Yeah,
we haven't had one of those in quite a while. It's been maybe last summer, so we're probably going on like 9 months or something. I would like to see that. Like now that Timeless, I think, is proving to be pretty successful. It seems like a decent amount of players are playing it. I think it's a big enough format that it could deserve its own anthology. Add 15, 20 cards that are like targeted at improving the format. And most of the cards that I'd want to improve the format, I don't think would be that hard to like program or whatever. It's not like we need these wacky, weird, like super hard cards. We need like Force Negation, like those style of cards, these staple level cards, these staple answers. So I would really like to see that as well. So maybe we get some of it in MH3. Otherwise, an anthology would be great. Do you think there's any argument for banning something from Show and Tell? Like, or are we still good for now? And like, let's wait and see what we get in Modern Horizons 3, maybe an anthology at some point.
I think we're definitely tiptoeing right now around it, but like even the best thing they put in right now, it's what? Ceaseless Hunger for Ulamog. Maybe it's not like Emrakul yet, right?
Yeah,
and it's not
Omniscience combos. Like there's Omniscience combos with it, but
the Omniscience combo, like that's definitely a thing. But I guess because of Omniscience existing, it does make it kind of rough. So I think you may as well either ban that card now, Show and Tell, because as you just start adding more busted things in, it's going to get worse, or like preemptively ban it, or maybe omniscience combos are just good enough.
I mean, I imagine sooner or later we'll get the rest of the Eldrazi. They'll reprint real like old school Emrakul and like even better finishers. So I'm kind of in the same place. Like maybe you just restrict it. I'm glad they took a chance with it. I would rather have WotC, especially with Timeless, like take a chance and add the busted cards in and see how they go and then adjust as necessary. But I think another few weeks or like a month or so, and it might be time to actually think about restricting it, because I'm just not sure the meta can really realistically adjust with the current card pool. Like there isn't the force negation or anything yet. So I'm not sure there is a way to just like adjust to it. Like, yeah, taxes or whatever, but then you end up with this really like weird inbred meta where the only decks you can play are show and tell or decks like specifically targeted to beat show and tell. And that's like not a great meta either. So I hope that they keep it in mind because it definitely seems like a dominant force, but it'll be interesting. I'm excited. I'm really even more excited for Modern Horizons 3 since it's coming to Arena. I think that's going to be really, really interesting this summer.
I think that's the step in the right direction for anything that isn't like, but like for any set that we wouldn't normally get on Arena. I think to make that set hype is to put it on Arena so that even Arena players can enjoy on it, right? 'Cause like I may not care for Modern, but it would be fun to still partake in Modern Horizons. So,
and I think they learned from, was it Battle for Baldur's Gate, where they like did the weird specialized and it like had the paper cards, but they changed it. Since then, they've kind of announced that like we're doing the real paper sets. They're not going to be like this weird rebalance thing. So I think they learned from the negative feedback to like specialize in some of those weird cards that didn't exist in paper. So I think that they're just doing the full sets from now on, which is makes me way more excited for it. So I think that was a good lesson that was learned. But anyway, that's Arena. I think it's time for a couple of Fishmail questions to wrap up our cast today. So if you want to send in Fishmail in the future, send them at Twitter at MTGGoldfish, hashtag them MTGFishmail. Question number 1 is from at Good Enough Isn't. It says, I feel like WotC is more and more designing cards with digital in mind. Copy tokens of double face cards, body of research, secrets like a Killer Among Us and Standard. I don't see this as a good thing, but what are your thoughts? So, Crim, are we designing more cards with digital in mind, and is it a good or bad thing?
Geez. I don't think that they're designing with digital in mind. Are they? I feel like they're designing more so for like Commander in mind, or mostly that. You're seeing that because like why do we even have Commander decks for Modern Horizons 3? Right? Like so I don't think we are. It doesn't feel like we are. Like what is like, can you think of any cards right now off the top of your head that are like, this will be great for digital? Let's ignore the alchemy cards. I don't think the alchemy cards count.
So I think if we go back to like the original comment, I think one like interesting example in these like, so I think cards are designed for digital, but I think it's in subtle ways. So like Body of Research, for example, that's the like 6-drop that makes a fractal where X is the number of cards in your library. That's an effect that I wouldn't say it's designed only for online, but it certainly plays better online, right? Because you don't have to pick up your deck and like count out every card to know how big your fractal is. So I think if that's what we're talking about, I think that's definitely happening, but I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing. Like Body of Research doesn't strike me as like, I don't know. Like, I guess if this was in Orcish Bowmasters, it was being played in like every deck in Modern or something, it would get pretty annoying in paper to be constantly counting your deck. But like, I think stuff like that's like, I think that's fine. And I think that as long as it isn't like making paper play worse, thinking through the impact of cards on digital is probably a positive. I know one of the best examples might be a Johnny's Pridemate, where they like eroded that to a May ability whenever you gain life. It used to be you may put a +1/+1 counter on it, and they just eroded it so you do put a +1/+1 counter on it. And that's a case where you just would have to click again and again in digital. The ability like technically technically is a functional change. Like, what if I don't want to grow my Ajani's Pridemate because there's an ensnaring bridge on the battlefield? My card is worse now than it was before. So you can construct these weird scenarios where the change matters. So that's an example of a card that was explicitly changed because of digital. But I think that's a positive, right? Like the ensnaring bridge downside scenario is such a fringe thing that I would rather have the card play well for the, oh my God, arena players love their life gain, the 100% of arena players that are going to play their silly life gain deck, than have it be like the one person that tried to make Soul Sisters in Modern work and got by ensnaring bridge because they couldn't say no to their Johnny's Pridemate. So I think it does happen, but I'm not sure it's a negative thing. At least I don't see it as a negative thing.
I don't think it's a negative thing either. Like, but then again, like, are those cards even like the card you mentioned, Body of Knowledge? I don't even think that's like because of it. Yeah, sure, it plays better on digital, but I don't think that's like digital in mind, right?
Yeah.
Aeon Chronicler, we have all of those.
I mean,
Soramaro, First to Dream, we have all these cards, and Psychosis Crawler. So these cards, like the whole power level equal to X in hand or X in graveyard, like Mortivore. So there are things that play better online,
we have heard Watsy talk a little bit about designing cards for best of one in mind, some of like the modal spells, making more modal spells.
Sure.
So I guess that would be with digital in mind, since best of one's only in paper. And I think maybe there's sometimes drawbacks of those cards, like maybe sometimes they're like stronger in best of three and a little annoying. But in general, like I think that's been fine too. So I guess for me, I think it happens. I think Watsy does think about digital when they design cards, but so far there isn't a design I could point my finger at and be like, oh, this is a bad thing. This made Paper Magic worse because of this design for Arena. So I think the way they're doing it now is probably fine.
Yeah, everything feels fine. So I guess because if they are designing for digital, it's not noticeable.
Yeah.
Like noticeably any different. And if that's the case, then I guess that's fine. They haven't broken anything for trying to make it digital, like prepare for digital.
All right, one more question. This one's from Ben Jacobovitz. Sorry if I butchered your name, Ben. And it says, what if Watsy wanted to fix one of the most hated MTG gameplay feel-bads with this idea? Do you hate games where one person plays Magic and the other person has lands but lacks the right color to cast any spells? What if a land cycle was printed that exiles to put a basic land into play from outside the game? They can use this for mana fixing. It doesn't credit out utility lands, blah, 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 blah. It could be really cool. So basically, what do you think of a land cycle that I imagine it's like a fetch land, but rather than fetching from your deck, you're like fetching a basic from outside the game? Or maybe they meant exile from your hand to like get a card from outside the game, like a Wish, but basic lands from outside the game. Could that work?
I mean, this, like, sure, they could add that, but with the way that outside the game works in Magic, this is now taking a sideboard slot.
That's true.
So I think it'd be a very cool land. I think it'd be a cool idea to make it so you don't get mana stuck. But I don't know if I Modern, for example, we just talked about it, a format where you only have 15 slots.
Yeah.
I felt like when I was playing Modern and just going at it in the thick of it, I often felt like 15 spots just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Right. Like, can you afford to give up a sideboard slot? I like the idea behind it. It's interesting, but how many slots can I dedicate to just a basic land?
Yeah.
And
I think
so... Best of one, this would be cool. I think this would be great in best of one. This would be specifically, we were just talking about like best of one in mind. This is a best of one card, right? This I could see being a cycle of lands on like digital, like Timeless or something like that. But when it comes to paper in a world of best of three, I don't think I would play this.
I would also say that I don't know if color screw in specific is on my list of problems facing the game. I know like not drawing any lands and not getting to play Magic is like, that's a problem that we've seen Watsy try to fix before. We've changed mulligan rules. We've added MDFCs, like a lot of ways to make sure that you're able to have enough lands to play the game. On the other hand, I think that color fixing is a little bit more dangerous. I know I lived through Arkham's Astrolabe in Modern, and we just saw like if your mana fixing is too good, you sometimes end up in these like 4 and 5 color soup pile metas where everyone just plays all the best cards. So I'm not actually sure that like color screw is a problem that needs to be fixed. I think like hitting enough lands to play your spells is important, and that makes the game more fun. But I'm not sure if like I didn't draw like the right color of lands to play my 4 color deck. Like at some point there's just got to be a cost, right, to playing 4 and 5 color deck. So I'm not even sure like I want that problem to be fixed, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, Astrolabe has already shown that maybe we can chill. And also currently Leyline of the Guild Pact.
Oh, yes. Good old Leyline. I do kind of love that card, though. That card does some funny things.
It enables funny things, but it also does some nonsense.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our podcast for today. So, Crim, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is a crew signing out.